Today we are opening a jar most people in the UK have never looked at closely enough. Honey. The one food that built a reputation on purity, honesty, and natural goodness. For years, everyone believed the same thing. If it's honey, it's healthy, it's real, and it's safe. But then came the investigations, the headlines, the border tests, and the now infamous fake honey reports that shook the UK food industry. Suddenly, shoppers across the country were asking a question they had never asked before. What exactly am I eating? If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type "interested" in the comments. And I will give you a heart. To be clear, we are not here to label anything as fake. We don't accuse. We don't speculate. We simply look at what shoppers themselves are saying, what the labels reveal, and the patterns that turned honey from a comforting kitchen staple into one of the UK's most quietly controversial foods. And this is where things get interesting. When the scandal broke, people didn't stop buying honey. They started examining it, tasting it differently, reading labels line by line, comparing textures, colors, and aromas the way they'd compare wine. For the first time, thousands of everyday Brits were noticing things they'd never questioned before. Some jars tasted far too sweet. Some had no smell at all. Some were thin and watery. Others crystallized in ways people had never seen. And the reviews that poured in were anything but subtle. In this investigation, you're not hearing from us. You're hearing from them, the shoppers who bought these honeys, opened the jars, dipped their spoon, and felt strongly enough to warn the next person. Before we look at the first brand, there's one pattern you need to know. It shows up in the taste. It shows up in the texture. And most importantly, it shows up on the label. Once you see this pattern, it becomes impossible to ignore. Now let's begin. Number 1. Stamford Street Company. Clear honey. If there's one jar in the UK that sparks more confusion and heated discussion than any other, it's this one. And the funny part? Most people only grabbed it because it was cheap, clear, and sitting right next to the real stuff. No drama. No suspicion. Just a simple budget pick. Then they opened it. That's where things started to go sideways fast. The reviews don't sound like people who didn't love the flavor. They sound like warnings. Blunt, confused, sometimes even angry warnings. Customers didn't say it was bland. They didn't say it was mild. They said, repeatedly, that it tastes like golden syrup, corn syrup, or in one case, battery acid. And the buyer who wrote that wasn't trying to be funny. Their exact words? The first taste was sugar syrup, and the aftertaste burned down my throat like chemicals. Another reviewer went even further. They tried to feed some to a tired bee, something people normally do with real honey. The bee refused to touch it. That review alone unsettled hundreds of shoppers. But the biggest twist is the name. Stamford Street Company. It sounds British, local, familiar, exactly the type of branding people trust without thinking twice. Yet dozens of reviewers said the same thing. Only after buying it did they notice the tiny print origin. Sourced from China. Packed in the UK. Again, origin alone doesn't prove anything. But the combination of extremely low price, vague sourcing, and hundreds of "this tastes like syrup" reviews is exactly the pattern experts have been telling the public to pay attention to. And then there's the texture. People said it was so runny it slid off toast before they could spread it. Others said it crystallized instantly in cold weather, like a syrup left outdoors. Many said it had no aroma at all, which for natural honey is very unusual. But the line that shows up the most? If this is pure honey, why does it taste nothing like honey? These aren't beekeepers leaving these reviews. They are normal shoppers. People who expected honey to taste like honey. Instead, they dipped a spoon and felt something was off from the first second. Enough shoppers complained that a few even called on the supermarket to investigate the product's provenance. Stamford Street Company. Clear honey is the jar that made hundreds of Brits stop mid-spoonful and ask the same uncomfortable question. What exactly am I eating, and where is it really from? Number 2. Hilltop Blossom Honey. On the surface, this jar looks like something you can trust. The branding is modern. The packaging feels polished. The company presents itself as transparent and proudly British. If you were judging honey by appearance alone, Hilltop would be an easy pick. But the moment shoppers flipped the jar around, everything changed. Right there on the label, printed clearly but quietly. Origin, a blend of non-EU honeys. For many British buyers, that single sentence was the first red flag. Not because non-EU honey is bad, it isn't. But because in every major honey investigation over the past decade, from EU lab tests to UK Council reports, one category keeps showing up with unusual results more than any other. Blended honeys from multiple undisclosed non-EU countries. Again, this doesn't prove guilt. But it does make shoppers look closer. And in Hilltop's case, the closer they looked, the more questions they had. One shopper put it bluntly. A blend of non-EU honeys, which recent surveys have shown can be mixed with syrup, since non-EU countries are allowed to do it. And then came the taste reviews. People weren't saying it was mild or floral. They described something that felt off, an unusual aftertaste they couldn't place, a sweetness that hit fast and aggressively like syrup instead of the slow, rounded sweetness real honey has. Over and over, reviewers mentioned the same thing. It doesn't taste natural. Some said it was too sugary. Some said it felt processed. Others said it tasted nothing like blossom honey, which is supposed to have gentle, noticeable floral notes. Then you look at the brand's own marketing. A carefully sourced blend of non-EU honeys. Premium. Natural. 100% the real deal. But many shoppers reading that looked down at the honey in their spoon and wondered. If it's carefully sourced, why does it taste so strange? If it's premium, why is the sweetness so sharp and artificial? If it's health-focused, why are so many people comparing it to syrup? And the biggest question of all, why blend honey from several unnamed countries? For a brand that markets itself as modern and high quality, the disconnect between the label, the marketing, and the taste is exactly what pushed so many shoppers to leave public warnings. Hilltop Blossom Honey earned its place on this list not because of one or two bad reviews, but because so many British customers said the same thing the moment they tasted it. Something isn't right here. Number 3, Sainsbury's Clear Honey. This one surprises a lot of people, because Sainsbury's is a supermarket family's trust. It's where people go for reliability, not confusion. Yet with this particular honey, confusion is exactly what customers described, and it started the moment they tasted it. At first glance, the jar looks normal. Golden. Smooth. Affordable. The kind of everyday honey people grab without thinking twice. But according to hundreds of reviews, the taste tells a completely different story. One shopper did a side-by-side test with another brand and said there was barely any honey taste or smell at all. Others said it reminded them of golden syrup, toffee, or something strangely artificial. One person even asked openly, "Is this even honey?" Then the comments got harsher. "This honey has never seen a bee." Now obviously, we cannot confirm that. But the fact a customer felt strongly enough to write that publicly shows how far the flavor profile strayed from what people expected. Texture was another theme. Many said it was extremely runny, even for clear honey. Some said the aftertaste was chemical, bitter, or simply wrong. A few described it as thin syrup with a hint of honey in the far background. But the part that raised the most eyebrows wasn't the taste or the texture. It was the label. Unlike many supermarket honeys, Sainsbury's Clear Honey doesn't list a country of origin. Not the UK. Not the EU. Nothing. For a lot of shoppers, that was the moment their confusion turned into suspicion. When honey tastes unusual and the origin is completely unspecified, it makes people feel like they're being left out of important information. Over and over, reviewers described the same experience. Too watery. Too sweet in the wrong way. No aroma. Tastes like syrup. Not what honey is supposed to taste like. These aren't experts talking. These are everyday shoppers who just wanted a reliable jar of clear honey from a supermarket they've trusted for years. And instead, they dipped their spoon in and found themselves asking, why does this taste nothing like honey at all? Number 4, Tesco Clear Honey. Tesco is the biggest supermarket in the UK, so this honey ends up in more kitchens than almost any other brand on this list. But the reviews aren't just disappointed, many of them are outright alarmed. Not because the flavor is bad, but because shoppers genuinely struggled to recognize it as honey at all. The first issue people raised was the health expectation. Honey is supposed to be natural. It's something people buy specifically for its goodness, for digestion, for immunity, for soothing the throat. So when reviewers started describing Tesco's honey as seed syrup, corn syrup, or rice syrup from China, That wasn't just a taste complaint. That was someone feeling like they'd bought honey to support their health, and ended up with something that made them question what they were swallowing. Then came the wording on the label. It says, "Made naturally from flower nectar collected by honeybees." Perfectly normal at first glance, until shoppers read it again, slowly. Some began wondering whether the sentence was crafted to sound like honey without confirming it was produced in the traditional way. One reviewer openly questioned whether the brand was describing the natural process bees normally do, or hinting at something else entirely. Now, we are not claiming anything. We are only reporting what customers publicly said after reading the label and tasting the product. And the taste comparisons get even more telling. People didn't describe mild honey. They described something that behaved like corn syrup, watered-down golden syrup, glucose solution, thin, sugary liquid with a whisper of honey hiding somewhere in the mix. And the texture was another major complaint. Many said it was shockingly watery. One person said it sticks to the teeth like syrup. Another said the smell was so bitter and sour it caught them off guard. Others said it gave them headaches. But the biggest concern for many shoppers wasn't the flavor, it was the complete lack of origin. Tesco Clear Honey does not list a country of origin. Not British. Not EU. Nothing. For reviewers, that missing piece felt like the final, uncomfortable puzzle piece. When honey tastes unusual and comes with no clear sourcing, it makes buyers feel like the story behind the jar is incomplete. The phrase that repeats through dozens of reviews is almost identical to what people said about Sainsbury's. This doesn't taste like honey. Not because it's bad. Not because it's weak. But because the moment it hits the tongue, shoppers feel like they're tasting syrup first and honey somewhere in the distance. This jar didn't just disappoint people. It made them stop eating mid-spoonful and ask, "What am I actually putting on my toast?" Number 5. Pasiaca Multiflora Honey. This is the jar that caught people off guard for one simple reason. The name makes you expect something wholesome. Multiflora honey sounds floral, gentle, natural. The kind of product you'd pick up from a village market in Eastern Europe or a small local producer. But the reactions from shoppers told a completely different story. The first red flag wasn't even the taste. It was the color. Multiple reviewers described it as an unnatural yellow, a shade that didn't look golden, amber, or floral, but almost artificially bright. It was different enough that some people questioned the product before they even opened the lid. Then they tasted it. That's where the complaints went from mild confusion to outright disappointment. One reviewer wrote, "Very bad. Nothing like any honey I know." Others described the sweetness as extreme, not the slow, rounded sweetness real honey delivers, but a sharp, sugary hit that felt closer to syrup. The texture didn't help either. People said it was thin, too runny, and lacking the body they expect from Multiflora honey. Several pointed out that it tasted more like pure sugar with something artificial layered on top. And here's the important part. Multiflora honey is supposed to have depth. It should carry floral notes. It should smell like something that came from nature. But review after review said the same thing. No aroma. No complexity. No real flavor. Just sugar. We are not accusing or speculating. We are simply reflecting what customers themselves publicly shared after buying and tasting it. And the pattern across those comments is unmistakable. People expected a floral, aromatic honey from multiple blossoms. And instead they described something that felt thin, overly sweet, and suspiciously artificial. Pasiaca Multiflora honey made the list because so many shoppers said the same thing, almost word for word. This doesn't taste like Multiflora honey at all. Number 6. Asda Classic Runny Honey. This is one of the strangest jars on the entire list, not because of one bad batch or one angry review, but because so many longtime buyers said the same unexpected thing. It's changed. People who had bought this honey for years suddenly began noticing differences, in the taste, the texture, the smell, even the way it crystallized. And for many of them, the alarm bells rang when Asda quietly removed one word from the label. Pure. One reviewer said it outright. They've removed the word pure, most likely because it's cut with syrup. Now, we're not making that claim. What matters is the public reaction, the confusion, the suspicion, and the pressure that one small label change created. Then came the appearance issues. Buyers said the lids were dusty, the jars looked old, and the crystallization was so advanced that it made them question how long the product had been sitting before reaching their kitchen. One person returned it immediately, saying it looked like it had been in storage for years. Crystallization itself isn't a problem. Real honey can crystallize naturally. But what unsettled people was the taste of the crystals. One reviewer wrote that once it crystallized, the flavor changed into something they didn't recognize as honey. Others described a strange, sharp aftertaste that felt nothing like the honey they had been buying from Asda for years. Then there was the behavior in water, a detail that comes up often in honey discussions. Multiple shoppers said it dissolved instantly, behaving more like a sweetener or glucose solution than traditional honey. One person even said they planned to report the jar to trading standards because the behavior was so unusual. And then the health angle, something almost no other brand on this list triggers. People weren't just disappointed. They felt misled. Several said they bought honey for its natural benefits, for its antioxidants, its goodness, its soothing properties, and instead felt like they were eating something sugary that didn't deliver any of the qualities they expected from real honey. One reviewer put it simply: "There's no goodness in this at all." Even loyal Asda shoppers complained that the large jars were discontinued and replaced with what they described as a cheaper, weaker version that crystallized faster and tasted less like honey. Others accused the new version of being watery, thinner, or not the same honey we had before. Again, these are not our claims. These are the words of Asda customers who bought it, tasted it, and immediately felt something was wrong. Asda Classic Runny Honey earned its place here because of the consistency of those reactions, not just confusion, but a clear pattern of shoppers saying, "This isn't the honey I used to buy." Bonus number 7. Little Over Apiary's Acacia Honey. This one is almost heartbreaking, because acacia honey carries a certain expectation. Anyone who buys it knows what it's supposed to be: pale, delicate, smooth, slow to crystallize, and lightly floral. It's one of the most recognizable honey varieties in the world. So when shoppers opened this jar and saw what was inside, the shock was immediate. One reviewer summed it up perfectly. "We looked at the jar, saw the horrid solid mass, and said, 'This isn't acacia honey.' And you can understand why. Acacia honey is famously slow to crystallize. Some jars stay liquid for years. Yet customers describe this one as solid, cloudy, grainy, and filled with sugar crystals right out of the jar. That alone was enough to make people uneasy. But the real disappointment came when they tasted it. Review after review described the same experience. No aroma. No floral notes. No acacia flavor whatsoever. Just sugar. Not a mild flavor, not a flat flavor, no flavor. Several customers said it tasted like nothing but sweet, dense sugar with no hint of honey at all. One person even said it was so tasteless that the only way to use it was in cooking, because spreading it on toast felt like a waste. Others went further, writing comments like, "This is not honey. It is sugar. There is no honey taste, no honey smell, nothing." To be clear, those are direct customer quotes. We are not making those claims. We are simply reporting what shoppers themselves publicly wrote after opening the jar. Then there was a detail that made people pause. The missing infant warning. Most honey jars carry a clear, "Not suitable for children under 12 months" label. One reviewer noticed this jar didn't have it and began questioning why. They wondered, in their own words, whether the jar contained so little traditional honey that it wasn't considered a risk. It's speculation, but the fact someone felt the need to ask says a lot about how far the product strayed from their expectations. And finally, the origin. Little Over Apiary sounds warm, local, English, a brand you'd picture producing honey from small farms, not huge blends. But many shoppers said they felt misled when they later discovered the truth. It's a blend of EU and non-EU honeys. One reviewer even said, "I was fooled. What a sweet English name, but this is far from English honey." Little Over Apiary's acacia honey didn't disappoint because it was cheap. It disappointed because people expected acacia honey, one of the most recognizable honey varieties in the world, and couldn't find anything in the jar that matched it. That gap between expectation and reality is what placed this honey on the list. Thanks for watching and staying with this investigation to the end. If there's one thing this entire breakdown makes clear, it's that honey in the UK isn't as simple as most people think. For years, we treated it like a guaranteed health food, pure, natural, and straightforward. But the moment people started looking closer, tasting closer, and reading labels with real attention, they began noticing patterns that were hiding in plain sight. None of this means every jar on this list is fake. None of this means every complaint is proof of anything sinister. It simply shows what happens when thousands of ordinary shoppers buy a product, open it in their kitchen, taste it with honest expectations, and feel strongly enough to warn the next person. The truth is, honey today falls into two very different categories. The jars that taste, smell, and behave like real honey. And the jars that make people stop after the first spoonful and ask, why doesn't this taste right? All we are doing here is listening to those reactions, the textures they noticed, the colors that didn't match, the labels that raised questions, and the flavor profiles that felt suspiciously syrup-like. You don't need to panic. You don't need to throw anything away. But from today, it is worth reading the fine print. Check the origin. Check the blend. Check how it tastes compared to local honey. Real honey has a signature. It has aroma, depth, and a certain honesty to it. Once you know what to look for, the differences become easier to spot. Stay aware. Stay sharp. And protect your plate.